Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project, brains behind the business. And today I'm running solo. Susan's up in Muskoka Lakes. So obviously she didn't want to tune in for this. But as always, we have to start off with a quote just before we get to our special guest. And I have one here from T.S. Eliot. And he says, only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. And with that, I'll introduce our special guest with us today, the CEO and founder of Tidal Commerce, one of Canada's fastest growing companies. Dennis Gorya is with us today. Dennis, how are you?
Hey, nice to see you, Rob, and thank you for having me. Elated to be here, and I'm doing very well today. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And before we get into you, what do you think about the quote?
I think it's very emblematic of, sort of a lot of what I feel I go through during a, day or during my life. So I would say it resonates with me for sure. Yeah, this notion of kind of pushing the boundaries and people feeling you're crazy and getting into arguments, which is natural, and sometimes you are crazy. But yeah, it's a great quote.
Well, I want to dig there, but before we get there, Dennis, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you end up as the CEO of Tidal Commerce?
Happy to. I guess my story started off in actually like right before university. I worked at a magic shop, and I was fortunate enough to have sort of a weekend job, I would say, on the for whatever, I don't know how much it was back in the day, like maybe $50 a weekend. It's enough for some pocket change, right? Including your bus fare and all. So I worked there for a good 3 to 5 years, and then one fine day I met a important mentor in my life, and this gentleman very quickly became family friends with my mother and father, and then became like a father figure in my life and also mentor. So like at an early age, I really had, the fortune of having a strong parent figure there to really, ensure that I had the right sort of path, education. One of my business partners today often says, there's two things that can really change someone's life. The number one thing is a good parenting, and number two is a good education. So I was fortunate enough and blessed to have both. And then kind of as I grew up in that environment, the magic shop was sort of my first job, so to speak. It was retail, but it's a very unique retail job. And I leveraged that, and I had a lot of interest in tech. So Vicky, my dad essentially loved uh, entrepreneurship and saw that I had a love for entrepreneurship because as a magician, you actually do have to make your own keep performance, and that's part of busking and all that kind of stuff is part of the gig. So with that in mind, he sort of helped me out with a few things initially, like, with websites and essentially, thought it would be interesting to maybe intern for one of his companies at that time that was doing programming jobs for very large CRMs and think of any custom application before, custom applications were so like low code as they are nowadays. And that was my first internship really. So like working in high school, that was like right before university, got the sort of fortune of seeing how programming is done, .NET programming, and I quickly realized it's not for me. So after that internship term, I told him I want a different job. So he had another company that was doing very well at the time, and effectively in a totally different space regarding hardware, cybersecurity, Wi-Fi appliances. So these were very large enterprise dealers, typically dealer, meaning to say enterprise clients, very large enterprise clients. So the sales cycles were longer, the deals were larger, the type of process to get to the end goal was different and more sophisticated. So I had the fortune of learning just by being a sponge. And, the office that we're in here now, the original office we were in is the second floor, and it's just like rented executive office spaces. So be able to sit there, listen to how Vicky, my dad, and his business partner were talking about the business, and just listening to how they would, deal with the partners, deal with the clients, deal with the staff. So I absorbed a lot through that, and basically worked under marketing and sales within this division. We did very well. The company scaled very quickly in the matter of 2 to 3 years. With that, I again got a little bit of a I guess, bored. I don't like the monotony of certain things. So similar to programming, I didn't like the monotony of sales, although it is quite different every time. It's just like being in a formal sales job didn't fit me. So after that, basically, I was getting into university, and he encouraged me to start getting into my own thing. Like he just said, I think you'd be a great entrepreneur. So Vicky, really, I credit him for that fully. He was the one that pushed me into it. So I just dabbled around in different things. I started off a clothing business, which did decently. Like it was okay. It was a great way to sink a lot of money, a great way to lose a lot of money. And that essentially, paid partly way through school. Some of, was fortunate to essentially have enough money through that to pay through school is not to have debt when I graduated, which is, not the case for many students nowadays. So with that, kind of gave me a little bit of a leg up as well. In second year of university, just through my own notions of doing this work on for my own benefit, really, clients or prospects started to reach out to myself and ask me if, I would be able to manage their social media or their website. So I just didn't know what I didn't know, so I just took on everything I could. So my first real project was for like an internship that paid me in food, right? But it was in the tech space. It was another graduate of the university that just graduated. She was kind of starting her own startup. She needed some cheap labor, so she figured she could pay these students in food. So that was really like the kickoff to that technical journey, and through a lot of trial and error, so that established a little bit of a foundation. And then very quickly, I kind of realized I can't just be running it on my own. So I asked Vicky to actually formally get involved in the business. So himself, and then Dave, his business partner, became involved. And then I sort of courted his brother-in-law at some point, Aziz, who's now become like an uncle to me. And he became one of my business partners as well. So now, the four of us were really a core group of the leadership, but I do love the dynamic that we have because it's very much so like a lot of wisdom that I'm able to, get from them. And I hope vice versa, they're able to get something out of the relationship. I do hope that they're able to learn and perhaps just, yeah, here's some of the stuff that they see at least echoed in action, right? So make them proud in that sense. So that's how things kind of progressed. It naturally, it was a company. It sort of formed into what Tidal is today. Being the founder and just kind of being in those seats, like my role is a little bit more visionary at the moment and focusing on like what's coming next and focusing on very large deals. So typically still very sales involved, ironically, but less structure to myself. So just kind of seeing where I can provide value. Part of my job, the whole point of it is to sort of delegate myself out of a job. I've learned I'm not the best at operations. I can do it to a certain extent, but as things scale, I make a lot of mistakes. I'm very hasty with my decisions. So I needed to remove myself out of certain things like that. So as baby steps progress, my job continues to morph, but really where I'm at right now is pretty stable, I would say, in terms of like figuring out what's coming next, the strategy, dealing with very large deals and partnerships. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of getting to how I got to in the seat today. And today I'm very grateful to be at least, servicing clients and servicing our team with my partners who are literally my family, right? So Vicky, who's my dad, right? And then his
Yeah,
brother-in-law, Aziz, Dave, and then, my actual like life partner inside the business, and other folks that I'm just so grateful to have around. So it's in truest word, a family business, which is very unique, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
that's amazing. Now, Dennis, you mentioned right this delegation as well as how you balance your time now. And I work with a lot of founders and they struggle with this element as they're scaling is I'm not the doer, I'm now the leader. How did you start to learn that and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, it's nothing that really is taught in school, unfortunately. I did have a fantastic, I would say professor in school that did try to instill a lot of these early learnings in entrepreneurship. Her name's Jane Michelle Clark. She's one of my favorite professors, hand down. I've loved her to death. Amazing human being as well. So a lot of the kind of early days of, how to structure things and how to delegate your time, what to prioritize on, I do kind of see a little bit of the knowledge from there. I would say, Vicky has influenced a lot of my, sort of decision making and helping me sort of figure out what I'm good at and not. And naturally, it sort of comes out as we have, arguments between each other as family does. So I think with that is kind of naturally exasperated where I should be focusing my time and not taking things personally as well. So like, things that's a certain bubble in this space are really about the business and what's best for that. So if you're not good at something, just being real with it and removing yourself out of that situation rather than causing further aggravation is really the objective. And it becomes even more sensitive when you're in a family business, right? You don't want to take that home. The thing that then really pushed it over the edge is a lot of education that I've been doing. So again, very fortunate and blessed to have access to education. So, this continuing education that I'm doing with this amazing program of like 60 entrepreneurs from around the world. It's a very kind of cool program. And one of the speakers out of that, one of our speakers or whatever we want to call them, instructors, was Mark Winters, and Mark Winters wrote Rocket Fuel, and very well known for his EOS sort of work. So that was kind of a lot of the initial sort of testing of it came out of what Mark had sort of taught us, and sort of the Q&As that we had and all the hard questions. So taking that and implementing it, and now what it looks like is essentially having a strong operations leader and having strong leadership that's able to take accountability for the work, not only the responsibility, but someone needs to be accountable for it. So removing yourself out of the accountability becomes key. So when you look at it, if you're still doing a lot of the pushing of it, you're still accountable, you're still responsible, right? So, and realizing that as a business owner, you don't have to be an employee in the business is also sometimes key for people. Just because you're an owner does not mean you have to be an employee. And so a lot of times owners burn themselves out thinking that it's all on them. So a lot of this is psychological, but again, I credit a lot of this with just having amazing, wise people around myself and then being able to access this education. So yeah, again, a lot of gratitude with that.
Amazing. Yeah. When I see it, it's totally, we do a lot of, obviously a lot of psychology and mindset work, and it's really from that foundation where folks are trying to jump in. Um, but I wanted to get back to the quote and about how you said that sometimes folks think you're crazy. Like, tell me a little bit about like that journey about pushing and how you can only go as far as you're trying to go.
Yeah, like there's another famous saying, I don't know who quoted this, but you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, right? So it's very true in business that, if you want to influence a decision or negotiate a particular decision because you see that there's benefit in it, there's needs to be a negotiation is not a dictatorship. A negotiation typically is not a bargaining chip. It's a mutual understanding, and then it's an agreement. There's no compromise in a negotiation. Both parties need to feel that they've won. So when that comes to play, really, when I think about my day-to-day interactions, a lot of the work that I do is thinking about the future. A lot of my team is in the now. So like me thinking about the future sometimes is not grounded in reality. So with that becomes, a little bit of a contentious conversations at times. So like if we're talking about what do we want to plan in the stream of social consciousness or in the stream of being better, environmentally social, conscious, you know, stewards. I guess that's one way of looking at it. Then, how I package that up or how I might need to communicate that to particular people might change in the circumstances, or who I can communicate it to without basically getting a reaction is also very limited. So, yeah, like a real example would be like, we're looking at B Corp in our space. It's a very people heavy business. We don't have a lot of, environmental output, but we do have a lot of people responsibilities. We do have certain things that can impact environmental usage, but that's not the biggest concern on our plate. It's really about, how do we treat society? How do we keep our employees happy? Are there programs to have proper governance within the structure of our companies? So those kind of things are where, I might have a limited kind of scope of people I can share that with, which is my leadership. And it's not everyone in my leadership. It might be one or two people. And then I have to trust that, these one or two people are basically able to take my vision of what I'm talking about and find the right time to bring it up. It might not happen right away, and that might frustrate me, but that's the part of like being able to let go and realizing again, just because you're an owner doesn't mean that you're responsible for that. You can't end run these processes. They're in place for a reason. There has to be some ground rules, right?
Hmm. That's so cool. Dennis, I do want to ask you that. Like, as you're thinking about going for a B Corp, what mission is driving you to make that impact on your folks?
Our purpose statement is pretty it's pretty simple because we're in a business where there isn't a lot of differentiation in the what we do. It's the how we do it is a bit more differentiated. So it's more process. It's more the the thinking work, which changes very quickly, right? It's very especially in this day and age. So really, our mission statement or our purpose statement, I should say a bit more broadly, is anticipate change and lead it. So anticipating change has a lot to do with, the not only technologies that are underpinning a lot of the work that we do, but also the processes, the way people work, the way that change management happens. And then the second bit of leading it really, we aspire to really be in the driver's seat a lot of the times with our clients, making those decisions in tandem. So, in our mind, if we're leading it and you're really drivers of that change, we really want to be doing that for the right stewards of that change. So when that happens to be, our employees, we want to be making sure the right people in the right seats, that they're rewarded for that same, for whatever values that we're putting forward. So those, being very values driven becomes very relevant. Having a mission to really orient them around becomes very relevant. But then it ties into other things like, so if we do outsourcing, what suppliers are we using? Do they have fair labor laws in their countries? Do they provide, benefits to their employees? What other sort of perks do they have inside of that country? Is there a certain labor standard in terms of payment, right? So like those kind of things are never often looked at. This provides a governing body that actually forces us to look into it. So this anticipate change and lead it is a little bit more broad, right? And then each of our companies, we have multiple companies within, umbrella, Tidal being one of them, will have different ways of expressing it, right? So, but the purpose of kind of being responsible stewards for people, environment, society, our clients, that's the general gist of it. Like you got to kind of take them all. You can't cherry pick. You can't just do one or two. Like I think it's got to be well-rounded, right?
Totally. Yeah. You sort of mentioned it, right? Is like now that you're spending time looking forward and obviously you're trying to anticipate change, what changes do you see coming down the pipeline that are really going to impact leaders out there?
Yeah, from a leadership perspective, I think, middle managers are pretty safe. I don't necessarily see a lot of threat to their jobs. Honestly, I think, in fact, middle management will probably go up even more as there's more need for it. I think in our space, so the SI space, systems integrators, we're typically dealing with two buckets of competitors. We have other boutique system integrators. A boutique is any firm under 250 employees, typically, boutique in our case being onshore, 250 people, not as scattered, amongst everywhere. So like in that respect, there's a lot of those folks. And then you have also the global SIs, so the GSIs, there's, probably around 2 to 4,000 like bigger companies, right? And there's only like four or five main big ones that everyone knows of, like EY and Accenture and all those. So, and some of them are SIs, some of them are consultancies. They all do different things, right? So within these businesses, there's a lot of process work, and all that process work is what we're seeing to be very cheap, which is the wrong word for it, perhaps, but very just dispensable in the sense that people are finding ways of outsourcing it for cheaper. People are finding ways of automating it to go faster, to do more work in the same amount of time. So unfortunately, the writing is on the wall, but that work is not going to be sustainable in the long term. When? No one really knows, but it's definitely the trends are showing that there's less and less actual, like say the hands-on keyboard will continue, but it'll be augmented with tools that actually help with the efficiency of the programmer or the leader in the company. So the key, I think the sort of the need of the hour now becomes good people management, understanding of these tools and quick ability to learn the tools and understand new concepts, being able to in a way be agile and fluid, right? So as things change, not being stuck in those ways, because we're only going to see, I believe, more change this next 18 months. So in the next 18 months, we're probably going to see the equivalent of about the last 5 years of change.
Wow.
So that there's no way for people to really know what's going to happen 18 months from now. So when you extrapolate that kind of curve, there's going to obviously be a lot of lost jobs. There's going to be a lot of new jobs, upskilling, cross-skilling. To be able to achieve those kind of cross-skillings, upskillings, you need good middle managers, right? Which is why it becomes the need of the hour. But a lot of those people skills is really what I would say is going to be key. And then there's just general good old, common sense, which is also missing quite a bit. Um, so I think that's definitely a good one to have, common sense, right? But yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing is really a little bit more of the insourcing, outsourcing, automations, and like more of the thinking work. So essentially, if you look at it, it's like four layers where you have like process work, then you have like process from and managerial, then you have creative, and then you have strategic. Like strategic being really the top layer that's going to have the most impact and costs as well that you can extract from clients within our industry, being professional services. So like more and more are we going to see firms kind of move upstream into that type of bubble. But there's a lot of moats, there's a lot of other companies that do very good work. So now it just becomes more of a competition for the best talent and ensuring process and customer experience is like super, super solid. So I hope that answers your question in too many ways.
I love it. Yeah, and I mean, we're starting to see that too. And I mean, I think that middle managers are some of the folks that get left behind the most in terms they don't necessarily get get training, and then the quality of that training is
Suspect, yeah.
suspect at best. Um, how do you train your middle managers, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, we're in a space where our management, our hierarchy is pretty flat. We've grown to I think like 80 people now. So like it's interesting because the way that we operate is more of like in pods. So like each client might have dedicated teams. So and that might have its own P&L and respects to its own delivery and outcomes that clients are looking to drive. So oftentimes what happens is that those folks at the top are middle managers effectively. So, and we get to compare and we get to see like how things work. And, from a training perspective, it needs to be driven from leadership. Like there's no other people in between. So whether that's the operations person that really takes lead there, our investment this year has been like a people operations manager, which is basically responsible for the employee experience from the onboarding till the day they offboard if they wish, if they do. So with that, there's this element of proactiveness. You have to plan for training. It's not an event that just happens. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, right? So I would even go as far as saying, building a training committee might be wise, right? Because there's a lot of work that might even happen with regard to like sourcing good speakers or good content, right? So, and oftentimes you'll be able to find within your city speakers that are willing to sort of do it for pro bono because they haven't really tried out their content fully yet, or they want to learn about, your feedback and things like that before they go full mainstream, right? So there's a lot of different ways, but without planning, it's not like you can't just have it happen. And the assumption also is like, oh, well, we have books. They should just pick up a book and read it. What I've quickly learned from our team is like, as long as there's books, yes, people will read them, but reading is like a self-selection bias. So it's like, out of your, say, 100 people, maybe 20% of them will actually self-select and read a book. And how often do they do that, right? And it's like, it's not a consistent learning basis. So yes, the intent of having books out there, they definitely will learn something, but it's not going to be like groundbreaking, right? So a formal program gives people expectations to follow and like a flow. So yeah, I hope that provides some insight.
I love it. And this is one of my favorite questions, but what's your biggest passion project, either at work or at home?
Hmm. I would say, part of there's two, I would say, that kind of like it, and it kind of culminates into one. So, outside of work, I really do enjoy, it's a similar sort of function of work, but it's like the networking side of what I do. It's like volunteering on boards and just getting involved in different respects. So to understand people, to learn more about people, almost like a modern day anthropology, like just by observing, learning about topics such as businesses important for sure, but sometimes it's like topics of like negotiation. How do you become a better negotiator? How do you become a better partner to your spouse? How do you become a better, family member? How do you become all these kind of topics are really interesting to me. Topics of spirituality, right? So a lot of it kind of culminates into like bursts of learning. So whether it's like I'm doing a class, like a kind of extended education, or I'm picking up a new book. I'm typically kind of always tinkering on something of that nature. But a lot of it also comes into volunteerism. So like two of the things that I'm sort of, I would say passionate about, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it, is for the sort of youth entrepreneurship. So providing some sort of structure and helping out on the marketing side of what they do here in Canada. There's a big global student entrepreneurship award that's very well respected and known. So having kind of the opportunity to sort of be in that circle, see how people are running it, contribute where I can. It is a volunteer-led thing, so there's not always like the most resources, but we're able to do make do what we have. And then the second one is a little bit more personal, but this year I have the opportunity to be on the board with Vicky as well, who's as you know my dad. So I think like that part of it really, I really wanted to have the opportunity to serve once with him.
Yeah.
I love the way that we work together on certain things, and this just gave a totally different dynamic. And just at the end of the day, it was like less about the actual work we're doing on the board, which is important for me as well. It's part of like a club that we're part of, so it's less charitable, but it was more for that purpose as well. So yeah, those are the things that I would say culminate into like passions projects. But with ADHD, it's like, a little bit of everything, right? Just trying to kind of keep on top of the dopamine hit. Yeah.
It's that's so cool that you get to do that with your dad. And yeah, I mean,
Special.
I love exploring all topics too. And so it's just fun to get into different things and tweak your interest, because I'm totally with you. Is like I get bored pretty quickly, and so it's always like
Yeah.
learning the next thing that's kind of interesting. Um,
Yeah. And it kind of
yeah.
also, it does drive people nuts around you, but it teaches you how to communicate better, how to have a filter, I guess, sometimes, which I could still do better with. But yeah, it's always a good thing, I think, to be learning in general. So
Absolutely. It's what makes great leaders, because almost everyone we've had on this show has always been someone who's leaned into learning, and it's a huge separator from obviously the folks that don't do that. And so it's
it's
something to
true.
always
Yeah.
be part of. Now, Dennis, can you tell us a little bit about Tidal Commerce, how we can find you? Of course, they can find you at
Sure.
tidalcommerce.ca, and I've dropped your LinkedIn in the podcast notes. But tell
Oh,
us a little
thank
bit
you.
about that, and how can our folks support you?
Yeah, thank you for obviously providing the opportunity for me to talk a little bit about, what Tidal does. So, how folks can support us. Well, I think it's always the other way around. We want to be of service to anyone that needs it, right? So we're known as like a boutique commerce consultancy that also does a lot of the execution. So, and those words, that mouthful of words, boutique commerce consultancy. Boutique just means we're small, we're more nimble, we're more personalized, like more personalized service in the sense that it's always white glove, a little bit over the top, but we're all about the service side of it. So think like, Ritz-Carlton, or like, how when you go to Chick-fil-A and they're like, my pleasure, right? So like just a bit more elevated in that sense.
Yeah.
But then we're also well known as a very good resource to actually get stuff done. So like knowing, a lot of the larger clients that we work with have kind of seen this like power of having a smaller team or an agile versus like a bigger, say Deloitte or EY that just is sometimes too big to sort of notice some of the faults before it gets too late, right? So in our case, just by design, we're able to at least address those pieces a little earlier before the ship sort of hits the iceberg. So those two things I would say is really what differentiates us, right? So anyone that's looking for commerce services, commerce means, selling anything commercially, right? So think of your customer experience and your commercial experience. That's where we shine. So like looking at it from an expert's lens, anyone that really needs perhaps some help, an audit of sorts. We're typically dealing with like larger industrial industries. So happy to offer up, anytime to anyone really listening to this that would like a free consult, an audit, or just a conversation to learn more.
Absolutely. So, folks, tidalcommerce.ca. And also, I've dropped Dennis's LinkedIn in the podcast notes. So, if you want to reach out to him, you
Thank you,
can
sir.
find him there. Dennis, with all the stuff that you're doing, what do you want your legacy to be?
It's a great question because it's often, not something that people think about early in their life. I'm 26, right? So I've had the fortune of having like mentors who are a great deal wiser than I am and having to see how they lead their life and having to see, what choices they've made and, what advice as well that they provided, solicited advice, of course. So one of the things that really comes to mind is like impact of some sort, right? So like for me, legacy is not necessarily saying, here's the torch, handle it, like here's some money, spend it. Like that's
Yeah.
not legacy, right? So, not a lot of family inside of my I would say sphere either. So like, in terms of like my biological family, like I'm great good friends with my mom. Like I would say like in terms of actual family dynamics, it's not like there's no real legacy that I see there. So like having a separate family life that I hope to start, in the future with my partner would be fantastic. But I can't say family isn't my legacy at the moment either, right? So when I consider the word legacy, for me, it's really about sustainability of what we're building today. So looking at it from the lens of, I would say firstly looking at a lens of family. So like putting them first, a set ahead of the business is really important to me. One thing that Vicky really emphasized earlier in my life was like understanding your roots, being true to your roots, even as you become more successful. And I think that's really something that resonates with me is like saying, you know what, putting that as a priority over the other because it's going to get messy otherwise. So that to me is like one part of it. So what do we have is a sustainable, were there issues that are not being cleared, the air being cleared on, those kind of things. Second is then becomes, what is the company doing to be impactful and long lasting? So that's where things like B Corp come into play. There's other ideas, but a lot of the folks I work with are focused on the now. Here's the fires, just put them out. I'm like, yeah, yeah, we can put out the fires, but it's also plan, right? So like there's that kind of natural inclination for me to sort of look out to say like, how is there longevity in this? What are the different mechanisms that can be put involved? And then third is just like hopeful and in the sense that there's some thought leadership or something that I can provide that's, you know, so been so graciously provided to me, and I've been fortunate enough to at least receive it and do something with it. And I think kind of having that opportunity to share some of this and at least help others is also part of the hope. Now, how that happens to be is like I'm 26. I don't think anyone should be thinking and listening to me and taking my advice at this stage in time because it's not appropriate. I'm not going to be coaching folks because I've not lived their life. I've not lived in their shoes. I need a lot more experience under my belt to actually be able to even claim something to that sort. So really where I hope to be is like to just to learn more. And then as I get older, perhaps move into things of that nature and help others out. Like coming back to that initial thing of, either it's good parenting or good education, right? So I can't be a parent to most people, but I can maybe help, provide some education in that sense. And maybe that makes an impact.
Amazing. Yeah, there's yeah, the opportunities for impact are endless. And I mean, you're already doing it with the young entrepreneurs that you're supporting. So it's incredible to see that, and it only grows from here. Dennis, it's been an absolutely amazing time for me to chat with you. And thank you so much for joining us on the show this week.
Thank you again, Rob. I'm really grateful for the time, grateful for the amazing questions, and to be able to preach a little bit. It doesn't sound like we have a lot of opportunities to be able to actually like talk about ourselves, which sounds a little selfish. I would admit I kind of sound like, oh God, I don't want to be saying I all the time. But it's a good outlet at the very least to be able to share the story and the people I love and what's important to our lives, I would say.
Absolutely. And it's another way for you to share some thought leadership. So that's always fun. Obviously, for us, head on over to elitehighperformance.com for any executive coaching, leadership development, and keynote speaking needs. And obviously, share the show with any other leaders in your life. For me, where I want to leave folks with today is the values. And you can see this clearly in how Dennis is leading Tidal. It's this focus on people, this focus on impact, this focus on innovation and being prepared for the future. But also, while they treat their customers in this way that's white glove, it's not just this template, which you get from a lot of the big consulting companies. And so there's a focus all the way through. There's a focus on family as well. And it's so incredible to see another incredible young leader out there making a difference. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us this week. It was incredible to talk to you.
Making me blush. Thank you. Really kind of you to say that. So, and again, thanks for reaching out and, making this happen. It's not often we get this opportunity. So, grateful. Thank you to you and to your team.
Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all next week.
Take care, everyone.